Well, it's good to be back with you for our third Maranatha moment. We gather today at the Advent wreath. We use each of these candles as a way of marking time through the season of Advent, one candle a week, till we come to the candle of the Nativity for Christmas. This is a helpful reminder of the need that we have in a weary year for patience. And Jesus' genealogy makes that extremely clear, right? Think of the 42 generations it took to get from the promise made to Abraham to the answer, the fulfillment of that promise, Jesus himself. 2,000 years. And that elapsed time reminds us that we cannot judge God by our calendar. God may seem slow, but he never forgets his promises. He always keeps his word in ways that blow our minds. And we see that in pretty much almost every single character in the Bible. Every one. We see a promise made. We see the obedience that follows when a person responds in faith to God's promise. And then we see a journey of movement and of waiting, and of waiting, and waiting. And then the surprise fulfillment. And it's funny how always those surprise fulfillments, they blow the mind, things that could not even have been imagined when the promise was given, and yet it's still a partial fulfillment. There's still more to come. And that was certainly true of the generation of Jews that welcomed Jesus as the Messiah. After the return from Babylonian exile, the last prophet gave the last promise in the Old Testament. His name was Malachi, and he told the nation of Israel, "The Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple, the messenger of the covenant whom you delight in. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers." This is the coming Messiah. But then God fell silent for 400 years. His people held on to this promise, waiting for God to come again. They waited through the rise and fall of one empire after another, coming through to conquer the land of Palestine and Israel. They waited through the spreading of Hellenistic influence around the world. They waited through the desecration of the temple by Antiochus Epiphanes, a great Syrian general who came and erected a statue of Zeus in God's place in the Holy of Holies. They waited through the freedom gained by the Maccabees, who threw off the yoke of the oppressor, the Assyrians. And I've got a little story here that might be familiar to you. What the Maccabees did once they purified the temple, they restored the worship in the temple, but they found that there was only one jug of pure sacred oil to keep the menorah burning in that sacred space. One small jug of oil. And for 8 days, that oil miraculously burned while they could produce more. That story now is familiar because that's the holiday of Hanukkah the Jews celebrate. The burning of that oil miraculously extended through time. That one small jar of oil symbolizes for Jews the need they have to wait. The faith of Israel burned for 400 years of waiting until God's plan came to pass with the birth of the Messiah. Those people, those faithful Jews waiting for so many centuries, were rewarded when the Messiah came with hindsight to see how every trial that they had endured was preparing them for what was to come. During those 400 years of waiting, the whole world changed. Cultures merged, Both Jews and Gentiles felt this growing dissatisfaction with religion as they were experiencing it. The scriptures got translated into languages of the world. Roads were built by the Romans so that people could travel all over the world with ease. And all of this was preparing the way for the Messiah to come, not just to the people of Israel, but to the whole world. All of this was happening in the fullness of time after generations of waiting for the Messiah to come to the world. And I guess the point for us to remember today is that as we wait in our weary year, as we endure the trials and the uncertainties, wondering when God's promises are going to come true in our life, wondering when our prayers will be answered, is to recognize that God is always doing 10,000 things in your life, and you might be able to see 2 or 3 of them at any given time. Dear people, we can have patience as we recognize that He is at work in our lives and that our lives are no different than any other generation of God's faithful people, journeying forward in hope in the promises of God, enduring with patience the trial of waiting for God to do what He is going to do. Endure patiently. Dear people, Maranatha.